The stagecoach jolted to a stop, its wheels grinding against the gravel road as a cloud of dust rolled through the still Wyoming air. Elias Kane stepped down, boots crunching against the earth, and let his eyes sweep over the valley stretched before him. He hadn't seen this land in more than 20 years, not since his uncle's calloused hand had ruffled his hair on a childhood visit. Back then, the cabin had seemed like a fortress, the kind of place a boy could imagine standing forever. Now, after the war, after the betrayals and the graves left behind, it looked more like a test of endurance. The cabin stood 100 yards ahead, squat and weathered, but strangely alive. A curl of smoke rose from the chimney, lazy and certain. Elias frowned. He had expected dust, silence, maybe a nest of coyotes in the rafters. Not fire, not warmth. He adjusted the strap of his rifle and walked forward with slow, deliberate steps, his hand brushing the revolver at his hip. Each creak of the porch boards sent a shiver through the silence. He pressed his palm against the door and paused, listening. Muffled voices drifted from within, women's voices, layered with tones of laughter, argument, and command. His jaw tightened. His uncle had been dead 6 months, and the cabin, by law, was his inheritance. Whatever strangers had taken root here were trespassers. He pushed the door open. 5 pairs of eyes turned toward him at once. The air seemed to solidify, thick with surprise, caution, and something unspoken. The first woman he saw stood near the hearth, her hand resting on the stock of a shotgun propped against the wall. Her hair was dark as midnight, her gaze sharper than any blade. She did not flinch at his entrance. Instead, she tilted her chin and said, coolly, "You must be Elias Kane." He stiffened. "And you are." She smiled without warmth. "The ones keeping this place alive." Behind her, 4 others emerged from shadow and firelight. One was tall, with hair the color of wheat and eyes that darted like a hawk's. Another, younger, perhaps no more than 19, clutched a threadbare book to her chest as if it were armor. A third leaned against the table with folded arms, every curve of her body carrying defiance. The last, small and quiet, kept to the far side of the room, her face half hidden behind a curtain of copper hair. The dark-haired woman, the leader, clearly, stepped closer. "This cabin was promised to us by your uncle." His word was law. "Hey, if you think you can handle all 5 of us, then you might earn a place at this table. If not, turn around now." Her words struck like a challenge, one Elias hadn't expected but couldn't ignore. He studied them, 5 strangers bound together by something stronger than coincidence. Their clothes were worn but practical, their hands calloused, their eyes wary. These weren't drifting saloon girls or helpless settlers. They were survivors, and survivors always had stories. He set his rifle gently against the wall, though his hand never strayed far from his revolver. "This land is mine. My uncles will soar to that, but I'll hear you out before I toss you back to the wilderness." A low laugh came from the defiant one leaning on the table. Bold words for a man who's just walked into a room outnumbered 5 to 1. "Numbers don't win fights," Elias replied, his tone flat, his eyes steady. The wheat-haired woman's lips twitched into the barest hint of a smile. "Perhaps not, but trust does. And you've got none, hey?" The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. The moment stretched taut, every heartbeat a drum in Elias's ears. Then, with a deliberate motion, the leader, Clara, she finally introduced herself, lifted the shotgun away from the wall and set it on the table. Not a gesture of peace, but a test. The others followed her lead in small ways. The book closed, the folded arms uncrossed, the copper-haired woman stepping half a pace forward. Elias exhaled slowly. He'd fought at Shiloh, seen men torn apart in seconds, but the tension in this room pressed heavier than any battlefield. "Hey, the enemy wasn't Clay." Clara's voice cut through the silence. "Your uncle made enemies, Mr. Kane. Debts, promises, blood spilled and buried. You stand in his place now, whether you like it or not. That smoke you saw rising, it's a signal. Folks out there are watching, waiting to see if this cabin falls into weak hands." He glanced toward the window. Beyond the glass, the tree line stirred in the late afternoon breeze. For a moment, he thought he saw a figure on horseback, still and watching. His fingers brushed his revolver again. "Enemies," he repeated quietly. "Plenty of them," Clara said, "and not all human." The youngest woman shifted uneasily, her knuckles white around her book. Elias caught her glance, fear mixed with trust, like a pup expecting both kindness and the lash. He forced his expression softer. And yet you stayed. Because running is harder than standing, Clara replied. The firelight painted her face in shades of amber and shadow, hardening the lines of grief and steel etched there. Elias recognized it. He wore the same look when he caught sight of his reflection, the face of someone who had lost too much yet refused to yield. The room fell into a heavy stillness. Outside, a lone coyote howled, its cry sharp against the fading day. Elias felt the weight of the moment settle on him. This cabin was no longer just timber and stone. It was a crossroads. Either he turned and walked away, leaving the ghosts of his uncle and the mysteries of these women behind, or he stepped into the fire and found out why fate had drawn him back here. He sat down at the table, his chair scraping against the wood. Then I suppose we'll see if I can handle 5 of you after all. The wheat-haired woman's laugh was short and surprised. The copper-haired one's eyes flickered with relief. The defiant one smirked, shaking her head as if she'd just witnessed a fool stepping into quicksand. Clara only studied him, unreadable, her silence a verdict yet to be given. Then the floor beneath them trembled, faint but undeniable. Elias's head snapped toward the window. In the distance, horses shifted, their silhouettes sliding like shadows through the trees. Watching, waiting. The cabin's walls suddenly felt thinner. Elias's hand settled firmly on his revolver, though he kept his gaze steady on Clara. Looks like the welcome party's arrived. Her eyes narrowed, gleaming in the firelight. Then you'd best prove you belong here, Mr. Kane. The fire cracked, the coyote cried again, and the cabin seemed to hold its breath. The riders emerged from the trees as dusk thinned into night, their figures black against the dim horizon. Hooves struck the earth in steady rhythm, the sound carrying across the valley like a war drum. Elias counted at least 8 men, maybe more hidden in the shadows. They did not rush the cabin. Instead, they circled at a distance, like wolves testing the scent of prey. Clara moved to the window, her eyes narrow, her voice low. Crow. The name came out like a curse, heavy with memory. Elias adjusted the cylinder of his revolver, the metal cool against his fingers. You know him. Her gaze did not leave the riders. Everyone here knows him. Bandit. Killer. Claims half this valley through fear. He won't leave empty-handed. The defiant woman at the table spat onto the floorboards. He wants the cabin. Always has. The youngest clutched her book tighter, knuckles pale, her breath shallow. Elias leaned close, his tone steady. Keep your head down, little one. Walls don't stop bullets. A whistle cut through the night. The riders slowed, their leader raising a torch high. The flame licked upward, revealing a gaunt face beneath a wide-brimmed hat. His voice carried sharp and clay. Kane, that cabin belongs to me. Your uncle owed blood, and you'll pay it. Elias stepped onto the porch, ignoring Clara's sharp hiss to stay inside. He let the torchlight catch his figure, shoulders squared, rifle in hand. Funny, he called, his voice even, because last I checked, a man's will holds more weight than a thief's claim. A ripple of laughter rose from the riders, cruel and hollow. Silas Crow leaned forward in his saddle, torchlight dancing in his eyes. Brave words for a man outnumbered. Numbers don't win fights, Elias replied, echoing his earlier claim inside the cabin. His voice carried, firm as stone. The silence that followed stretched, brittle as glass. Then the gunfire began. Bullets cracked against the porch posts, splinters slicing through the air. Elias dove to one side, firing 2 shots in return. One rider pitched backward with a scream, his torch tumbling to the date. Clara yanked the shotgun from the table, pumping a round into the night. The blast echoed, scattering the horses into brief chaos. The women moved with surprising coordination. The tall, wheat-haired one hauled the youngest to the floor, shielding her with her own body. The copper-haired girl dragged a bucket of water toward the hearth, stamping out sparks that leapt from a bullet-torn log. The defiant woman seized a pistol from beneath her skirts and leaned against the window frame, sending sharp cracks into the dark. Elias fired again, the revolver kicking hard against his palm. He saw Crow's men scatter into the trees, regrouping beyond the torchlight's reach. The cabin fell into tense quiet, only the hiss of cooling gun barrels filling the air. They'll be back, Clara said, her tone grim. She reloaded with swift, practiced motions. Crow never walks away after the first taste of blood. Elias's chest rose and fell, his mind already racing. How many more does he have? Dozens, Clara said. Maybe more. He doesn't fight for land. He fights for Faye. Break us here, and the valley bends to him. The words struck Elias deeper than the gunfire. He had come here for inheritance, for a piece of his family's past, not for war. Yet war had found him again, as it always did. The youngest lifted her head, her voice trembling. Why don't we just leave? Clara's eyes hardened. Because leaving means running forever. Some ground has to be held. The defiant woman's laugh was sharp, edged with bitterness. And some ground isn't worth dying on. Elias studied their faces, each marked by weariness, by scars both seen and hidden. Survivors, every one of them. Survivors who had chosen this cabin not because it promised safety, but because it demanded courage. For the first time since he'd stepped off that stagecoach, he understood the gravity of his uncle's legacy. He turned back to Clara. We'll hold it, but I need to know I can trust what's at my back. Her gaze flicked over him, measuring, weighing. Trust is earned, Kane. Prove yourself. The night stretched on, filled with the hiss of the fire and the distant shuffle of horses. Elias kept to the window, his eyes scanning the tree line. At times he thought he saw shapes moving, but they never drew closer. Crow was waiting, letting the fear ferment. Hours later, when the sky began to pale, the second attack came. This time it was fast, brutal. Arrows tipped with pitch streaked through the early dawn, flames hissing as they struck the roof. The youngest screamed, covering her ears, while the copperhead one hauled buckets of water up the ladder. Elias fired again and again, his shots sharp, deliberate. The defiant woman laughed as she emptied her pistol into the deck, cursing with every pull of the trigger. A rider broke from the trees, charging with a pistol raised high. Elias steadied his breath, squeezed the trigger, and sent the man tumbling from his saddle before the horse even reached the porch. The smell of smoke thickened, filling the cabin with heat. Clara barked orders, her voice slicing through the chaos. You, water! You, cover the north side! She fought with the precision of someone who had survived battles before, her commands clear and merciless. Elias felt the weight of his revolver's last round. He waited, held his breath, and fired into the torch a rider carried. The flame exploded, showering sparks, sending the horse bolting into the trees. The sudden disruption scattered the attack, men cursing as they fell back. Silence returned, broken only by the crackle of smoldering wood. The women rushed to stamp out the remaining fire, their faces streaked with sweat and soot. Elias lowered his revolver, chest heaving, the taste of gunpowder thick on his tongue. The youngest pressed herself against the wall, tears glistening on her cheeks. The wheat-haired woman crouched beside her, brushing soot from her hair, whispering soft words Elias couldn't hear. The copper-haired girl's hands trembled as she poured the last of the water across a smoking beam, while the defiant one reloaded with a grin that masked her shaking shoulders. Clara approached Elias, her face grim but her eyes steady. You shoot clean, she said. You think fast. That counts for something. Elias holstered his revolver, though his hand lingered near the grip. But it won't be enough. He'll be back stronger. Clara's silence was answer enough. She turned away, gaze settling on the window where dawn light spilled through fractured glass. Elias felt the weight of exhaustion in his bones, but heavier still was the truth pressing against him. This wasn't just a fight for a cabin. It was a fight for survival, for belonging, for the right to stand against the tide of men like Crow. And though the walls around him were scarred with bullet holes and charred with flame, he felt the pull of something he hadn't known in years. Purpose. The morning light revealed the valley in muted gold, serene and indifferent, as if no blood had been spilled in its shadow. The world outside seemed calm, yet Elias knew calm never lasted. Crow was still out there, waiting. He glanced at Clara. She met his gaze without speaking, but the unspoken challenge lingered between them. The first battle had been survived. The war had only just begun. The letter lay on the table like a coiled snake, its edges browned with age, the ink smudged by sweat and years. Elias turned it over in his hands, unwilling to break the seal. Something in him already knew it would cut deeper than any bullet. Clara stood near the fire, her arms crossed, her expression carved from stone. The other women lingered nearby, their eyes heavy with unspoken questions. When Elias finally opened the letter, his uncle's handwriting spilled across the page in jagged strokes. The words spoke of gold buried beneath the land, hidden in secrecy, meant as both salvation and curse. Asterisk, this fortune is blood-soaked. Guard it, or it will destroy you. Asterisk, Elias felt his throat tighten. His uncle, the man who had once seemed larger than life, had left behind not just a cabin, but a burden that would invite every thief and killer in the valley. He folded the paper with care, sliding it into his pocket. Clara's voice broke the silence. So it's true. He left you the secret too. Elias's eyes narrowed. You knew about this. We suspected. Men don't fight that hard for empty land. The defiant woman leaned on the table, her lips curling into a bitter smile. Gold. Always gold. Men kill for it, women suffer for it, and no one ever walks away richer. The youngest sat quietly in the corner, clutching her book. Her voice was small, fragile. If it's cursed, why not leave it buried? Clara shook her head. Because Crow won't stop until he finds it. And if he digs it up, he'll buy every gun from here to Texas to bleed us dry. Elias's chest tightened. He had carried enough ghosts from the war, but this inheritance threatened to breed new ones. The weight of it pressed against his ribs, heavy as iron. He looked at each of them, 5 strangers bound by desperation, clinging to a cabin that had become both shield and snare. In the days that followed, unease thickened in the air like smoke. Trust was scarce, every glance weighted with suspicion. Elias watched the women more closely. Their skills were undeniable, their loyalty to each other fierce. Yet something gnawed at him, a sense that not all 5 were truly on the same side. One evening, as dusk bled into night, he caught movement by the back door. A figure slipped into the shadows, swift and quiet. Elias followed, revolver drawn, boots silent on the earth. He found the weak-haired woman crouched near the fence line, whispering into the dark. A glint caught his eye, steel flashing, a hand reaching from the trees. She pressed something small into the stranger's palm before he melted back into the night. Who was that? Elias's voice cut like a blade. She spun, her eyes wide, her mouth parting, but no words came. He stepped closer, the revolver steady at his side. Answer me. The others burst from the cabin at the sound of raised voices. Clara's shotgun was in her hands, the defiant one's pistol gleaming in the lantern light. The youngest clung to the doorway, trembling. Elias kept his gaze locked on the weak-haired woman. She's been talking to Crow. Gasps rippled through the air. The woman's face twisted with something between guilt and defiance. I did what I had to, she hissed. You don't understand. He promised. He promised he wouldn't kill us if I gave him news. I thought. You thought you could bargain with a wolf, Clara snapped, her voice sharp with fury. The traitor's eyes brimmed with tears. I wanted to protect us. Elias shook his head slowly. You sold us out. The group fractured in that instant. Shouts overlapped, accusations flying like bullets. The youngest begged for calm, her voice breaking. The copper-haired girl tried to step between them, but Clara's rage burned hotter than reason. She raised the shotgun, and for a moment Elias feared the night would end in blood inside rather than outside. He placed a firm hand on the barrel, pushing it down. Not like this. If we turn on each other now, Crow's already won. Clara's chest heaved, her knuckles white on the weapon. At last she lowered it, though her eyes never softened. The weak-haired woman sobbed once, then broke into a run, disappearing into the trees before anyone could stop her. Silence followed, raw and jagged. The youngest whispered, She won't come back, will she? No, Elias said, his voice flat. But Crow will. They did not sleep that night. The betrayal hung heavy, twisting every shadow into threat. Elias sat by the window, revolver resting across his knee, watching the tree line for the inevitable return. He thought of the letter, of his uncle's warning, of the blood already spilled. Gold had drawn them all into this snare, and gold would either bury them or bind them together. When dawn finally broke, the answer came. The forest stayed, branches snapping under hooves. Dozens of riders emerged, 5 more than before, their silhouettes blotting out the horizon. Silas Crow rode at their head, his face twisted in triumph, his voice carrying across the valley. Bring me the gold, Cain, or I'll bane your cabin to ash and salt the earth where it stood. The women gathered at Elias's side, their faces pale but fierce. The copper-haired girl gripped an axe with both hands, her knuckles white. The defiant one spun the chamber of her pistol, her lips set in a grim smile. Clara stood tall, her eyes locked on Crow, her jaw like iron. Elias felt his heart pound against his ribs. There was no room left for doubt. The gold had to be unearthed, not for greed, but for survival. His uncle's curse hung over him, but the choice was his now. He turned to the others, his voice low, steady. "We dig. Tonight." Clara nodded once, sharp and certain. Outside, Crow's men spread across the valley, flames already licking from their torches. The cabin groaned under the weight of destiny, its walls scarred but unbroken. Inside, 5 souls and a weary gunslinger prepared to gamble everything on one last secret buried in the date. The ground itself seemed to hold its breath. The night was black as pitch when Elias sank the spade into the frozen ground behind the cabin. Each strike rang through his arms, his breath sharp in the cold air. Clara stood nearby, lantern in hand, her eyes fixed on the shifting shadows at the tree line. The other women worked in silence, passing buckets of date, their movements steady, purposeful. Every scrape of metal against earth carried the weight of their survival. At last, the shovel struck wood. The dull thud silenced them all. Elias crouched, brushing away soil with his hands until the edge of a chest emerged, its board swollen with age, its iron hinges mottled with rust. Together, he and Clara hauled it from the pit, the lantern glow trembling across its surface. The youngest woman knelt beside it, her eyes wide, whispering as though in prayer. The lock broke with a hammer strike. Elias lifted the lid. Gold coins spilled their gleam into the dark, bricks of silver stacked like bones. Jewels glimmered faintly, each one soaked in history and blood. For a moment, no one spoke. Wealth enough to change their lives forever lay before them. Yet none of them reached for it. They knew what it meant. Crow would not stop. Elias closed the chest with a final snap. "This isn't treasure. It's bait. We'll use it to draw him out." Clara's eyes flickered with approval, though her voice stayed even. "If you lead, we'll follow." Before dawn broke, Crow's men returned. The valley filled with the low thunder of hooves, torches blazing like a river of fire. They surrounded the cabin, their jeers rising with the smoke. Silas Crow rode forward, his grin savage beneath his hat. "You dig up my gold, Cain," he shouted. "Hand it over, and I'll leave you breathing." Elias stepped out onto the porch, rifle in hand, shoulders squared against the morning light. The women fanned out behind him, each armed, each unflinching. His voice cut through the cold air. "You want it? Come take it." The standoff shattered in an instant. Gunfire ripped through the dawn, bullets shattering the porch posts, splinters spraying like hail. Elias dropped to one knee, firing clean, deliberate shots. Each crack of his revolver found a target, riders tumbling from their saddles. Clara worked the shotgun with mechanical precision, each blast echoing like thunder. The defiant woman laughed wildly as she emptied her pistol, reloading without fear. The copper-haired girl swung her axe against any man who dared close, her eyes blazing. Even the youngest, trembling but resolute, ferried ammunition and water, her courage burning brighter than her fear. The cabin shook with the fury of the assault, windows splintering, the roof smoking from flaming arrows. Elias barked orders between shots, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Left side, cover it. Don't let them breach the door." His words found eager hands. Together, they fought as one. Then Crow himself dismounted, striding forward, pistol drawn, his eyes fixed on Elias with murderous hunger. "End of the line, Cain." The battlefield hushed around them, as though the earth itself waited for the outcome. Elias stepped down from the porch, revolver in hand, his boots crunching against the date. The two men faced each other in the open, the valley stretched wide in silent witness. Elias's breath slowed. His world narrowed to the space between them. The weight of his revolver, the twitch of Crow's fingers, the whisper of wind. For a moment, he was back on the battlefield, the faces of fallen men flickering through memory. But this time, it was not for generals or flags. This was for the women behind him, for the land, for his own redemption. Crow moved first. His pistol snapped upward, muzzle flashing. Elias fired at the same breath, the sound exploding through the dawn. For a heartbeat, both men stood frozen. Then Crow staggered, clutching his chest, disbelief carving his face before he crumpled into the date. The silence broke in a rush. His riders cried out, scattering in panic. Without their leader, their courage dissolved like smoke in rain. Within moments, the valley emptied, hooves thundering into the distance, leaving only dust and the scent of powder. Elias lowered his revolver, his body trembling, every muscle burning with fatigue. Clara rushed forward, steadying him by the arm, her grip strong, unyielding. Behind her, the others emerged from the cabin, their faces streaked with soot, their eyes wide with the raw edge of survival. The youngest ran to Elias, tears on her cheeks, clutching his sleeve as if to anchor herself to the earth. The chest of gold still sat in the date, its gleam harsh and uninviting in the new morning light. Elias stared at it, then at the faces around him, women who had fought, bled, and stood unbroken at his side. Slowly, he pushed the lid closed once more. "Let it rot," he said, his voice low but firm. "It's cost enough lives already." Clara met his gaze, her expression softening for the first time. "Then what do we build instead?" Elias looked at the cabin, its walls scarred, its roof half-burned but still standing. Beyond it stretched the valley, vast and untamed, waiting for hands willing to shape it. He felt the weight on his shoulders shift, not gone, but lighter, shared. "We build a home," he said simply. The women exchanged glances, weary smiles breaking through soot and tears. For the first time since his return, Elias felt not like an intruder in his uncle's shadow, but a man who had earned his place in the world. The sun crested the ridge, spilling gold across the valley, not from coins, but from the sky itself. Elias stood with his rifle slung at his side. The 5 women gathered around him, their silhouettes etched in firelight and dawn. His voice carried softly, meant as much for himself as for those who would listen. "A man can inherit land, or gold, or ghosts. But I never thought I'd inherit 5 souls who'd teach me how to fight for something worth keeping." The cabin smoldered behind them, alive still, a monument to their defiance. The valley stretched ahead, filled with promise and peril, but also with the chance of something new. Elias turned once more to the women, his voice steady, resolute. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." And as the wind swept through the valley, carrying the scent of smoke and the promise of spring, the story closed its circle, leaving the ground richer not with buried treasure, but with the roots of a family forged in fire. Asterisk if this story moved you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every tale deserves an audience, and yours begins here. Asterisk.